We are in the Strzelecki Desert. We are paddling on Cooper's Creek. That is the famous dig tree. We are in search of the story of Burke and Wills, 1861. One of the most iconic stories in Australian history is the story of Burke and Wills. A committee, an exploration committee in Victoria, put together a party led by Robert O'Hara Burke with his 2IC William Wills, left to great fanfare from Melbourne in 1860 to head towards the Gulf of Carpentaria. No men had done it before. It was the great south to north challenge and conquer, and off they went. They had so many supplies, it was unbelievable. Anyway, where the focus of this tragedy lies is here in this spot here on the Cooper Creek. We're in the very southwest corner of Queensland, just over the border from South Australia. The Cooper Creek runs down through the Channel Country and it comes down through here. And on their way up north, this was one of their great spots, their depot. They had depots in Menindee, Bulu, and here at Cooper Creek here. In the middle of the Strzelecki Desert runs this beautiful spot. Today you can see pelicans off in the distance. This coolabah tree here is hundreds of years old. And this is where Burke, Wills, John King and Charles Gray took off for the Gulf of Carpentaria. And here left four men, William Brahe, a guy called McDonough, Mahomet and Patton stayed here. They were to stay for roughly 14 weeks because Burke believed he'd be back from the Gulf and back into this area in time. They stayed 4 months and 5 days. And on the morning of April the 21st, 1861, they took off. Patton was very unwell. They were struggling with supplies, and they decided to head back towards Menindee. And they left on this tree up here, the famous dig tree, the sign which said dig. Dig! And they left some supplies there. And so off they took. Well, remarkably, Burke and Wills and King returned. Charlie Gray had died from exhaustion and malnutrition. He had been buried back up further north of here, some 60 to 70 miles away. And what happened was they got here and they dug when they found the supplies. This kept them going for another 3 weeks or so because the desire was to go down towards Mount Hopeless. It turns out they had missed William Brahe and their party by a matter of 9 hours. So this here is the famous dig tree right here. Underneath where I'm standing, great little monument here by the Napa Mary people, where this monument lies, and you can do a free camp. Well, actually, no, a camp for a very small fee. This is the famous dig tree here. And of course, Burke and Wills headed down, trying to find the Strzelecki Creek, heading towards Mount Hopeless. They had taken off, believing they couldn't follow Brahe and that team toward Menindee. So they went that way, and things didn't go so good, right? Brahe heads back to Menindee, where a guy called William Wright and another crew had so many supplies, crazy amount of supplies, but it's still not got here. William Wright and the Royal Commission later on was savaged for his incompetence and his lack of courage and his lack of foresight. And so Burke and William Brahe and William Wright came here to see whether Burke and Wills had returned. And they got here to this spot here on the Cooper Creek, and they stayed for 15 minutes. And as they looked around, they couldn't see any signs that anyone had been here. But the fatal part of the story was was that Burke and Wills and King actually had got here. They had dug up the supplies. They had written a note, said where they were going, reburied them here at that big tree just under here, and headed back off again. Bra and Wright did not think to dig up, which would have given them the information that would have told them that Burke and Wills and King were alive and where they were heading. But they didn't think to dig up here at the dig tree. This is an incredibly tragic story. And as we know, they headed back down the Cooper. Wills died, Burke died. John King got rescued on the 15th of September 1861 by an Aboriginal tribe when Alfred Howard came and a guy called Welch rescued John King. Burke and Wills didn't die here at this spot, but it's that famous spot where that sliding doors moment, one day difference, a matter of hours difference, and Burke and Wills wouldn't have ended up having a funeral in Melbourne to half the city's population. They would have returned as heroes. Another one of those fascinating Australian stories that's tragic. As the story goes, Wills and Burke and King headed south, trying to find the Strzelecki Creek towards Mount Hopeless in northeastern South Australia. They headed there and their supplies came to an end. An Aboriginal tribe at times came by and gave them nardoo and fish. But Burke at one point shot his gun, fired a bullet over their heads and scared them off, and the three men found themselves all by themselves. And eventually Wills, aged 27, weakened and weakened and weakened. And reluctantly Burke and King decided that they had to leave Wills on his lonesome, because he said to them, head up the Cooper, back towards the dig tree, see if you can find one of the Aboriginal tribes and see if they can rescue us. And so reluctantly they left Wills, and he lay there and he died just nearby here on the banks of the Cooper Creek. Starving, malnutrition, age 27, to his tragic death. So Burke and King leave Wills, promising to come back. They head back up the Cooper Creek towards the Dig Tree depot, trying to find help from the Aboriginal folks. As you can see from right now, here at the Cooper Creek in August 2023, well, you can find plenty of water here in the desert, in the Strzelecki Desert. But Burke and King, malnourished, exhausted from their journey all the way to the Gulf and Carpentaria and back, don't have enough nutrition. Their nardoo's not satisfying them for some reason. They just don't fish. Who's to know? And Burke in the end dies from exhaustion. He lays down on his back and he has King give him his revolver, and he lies down with his revolver. He writes his final will and testament. He hands it to King to hand back to Sir William's store when he returns to Melbourne, and there he is to die, and he does overnight with strict instructions not to be buried. And so Robert O'Hara Burke dies on the 30th of June 1861. Incredible. When Howard and his team find Wills and remains and Burke's remains after they find John King alive, their remains have been taken by wild animals and there's not much of them left. And in the end, the search party returned them to Melbourne, where they have a formal funeral and half of the population of Melbourne turn up to what turns out to be the first state funeral of Victoria. It captivates the masses, this story, from the southern most point of Melbourne all the way through to the Gulf of Carpentaria. As you can tell out here, she's pretty harsh country out here near Innaminka in South Australia's northeast. So Wills has died on the 29th of June. Burke's died on the 30th of June. King, disoriented, weak, starving, gets taken in by an Aboriginal tribe that lives in this area. There in July 1861, and they take him into his care. He becomes a member of the tribe, a member of the family. But back in Melbourne, the Exploration Society decided to send help under the leadership of an excellent bushman called Alfred Howard. And they come into this area, and after 6-8 weeks of King still being missing, presumed dead, they find him in this area. A guy called Welch finds him in between Wills's grave to the west and Burke's grave to the east. Right here, John King is alive, age 22. Went back to Melbourne to a hero's welcome. Sadly died 10 years later. The tragedy never ended in this story. Just a few other bits of curiosity. What was carved in about the date they left, that's just now a model. That is no longer visible, nor is Howard's blaze visible, and nor is actually the word dig visible on the dig tree. But Camp 65 blaze, which was the to identify that this was their camp, one of the last depot before the 4 blokes went to the Carpentaria, that's still just slightly visible. So it's in there of this big coolabah tree. You can kind of see the B, the LXV. There, it's there on the model, but it's actually in there. So imagine this tree here, these old trees here are hundreds of years old, and imagine the stories that they could tell. If only trees could talk. Well, can they? They do in the Lord of the Rings. That which captured the imagination of the people of Australia, and particularly the people of Victoria, is that in 1898, so Wills and Burke die late June 1861. An artist by the name of John Dick came here. So the dig tree's just over there and browse tree's just over there. There's the water. They came and carved a picture of Robert O'Hara Burke in what's known as Dick's Blaze here. And there it is. 1898. So we're talking 125 years ago that little carving remains. Here I am at the Dig Tree campground. You can camp here. Pretty good spot, huh? So we've just been for a paddle. Here's our tent. Here's our fire. And just got a little hand line going down there on the Cooper. Brilliant spot as the sun begins to set. Cooper Creek, southwestern Queensland. Your beauty.